good afternoon on what is a bright, clear day. It is Wednesday the 15th of December. It's a bit chilly, but I'm out here in the reading nook with a nice hot cup of tea and a cat who is not ours, ready to delve once more into another big box. So next one I'm going to do is from this heavy box. I've already opened it and pulled out a few things, and the next thing I am going to pull out is this, which is the Jeddak of Jeddak's era supplemental rulebook for Edgar Burrough's John Carter of Mars role-playing game. Essentially the John Carter of Mars Adventures on the Dying World of Barsoom role-playing game, published by Modiphius Entertainment. This is one of essentially 3 era source books published for the game, exploring different aspects of the setting of Barsoom, created by Edgar Burroughs in the early years of the 20th century, beginning with Princess of Mars. And Modiphius Entertainment got hold of the license and produced a role-playing game and a number of supplements for it, using the 2D20 system. That powers a number of different role-playing games, things like Star Trek Adventures, or the Dune role-playing game. And this sits at the least complex end of the scale, whereas you've got like Mutant Chronicles perhaps at the most complex, and sort of like Star Trek, sort of Dune, and Star Trek sort of like at the lower end, and Conan sort of like at the upper end. So let's have a look. Barsoom and the Jeddak of Jeddak's era. My better judgment tells me that it would be a foolish thing to do, I said. But I followed my better judgment always. My life would have been a very dull one. Edgar Burroughs' John Carter of Mars Jeddak of Jeddak's era supplemental rulebook provides you with an in-depth look at the Jeddak of Jeddak's era play for the John Carter of Mars Adventures on the Dying World of Barsoom role-playing game. Narrator advice on using the themes and tone of the era and the plots of the last 8 John Carter novels, including The Mastermind of Mars and Skeleton Men of Jupiter. New player character options for Kaldanes and their Rykors, Morgors, Salvators, Macenas and Kangaroo Men, including new pre-made talents, flaws and expanded accolades, and renouncements for those rarer scene characters. We've also got new narrator characters, those most beloved and despised of the era. New strange technology powers for your players to acquire mysterious places of the Jeddak of Jeddak's era to explore, all packed with plot scenes to inspire narrators. New optional rules for creating exciting inventions that you can change the face of your campaigns, and expanded renown rules for characters with exploratory and scientific backgrounds. Okay, so let's get into it. Now I should say, of course, the format for this book is landscape, not portrait, which is quite radical in terms of role-playing games. There are very few that use that format. Most of the time they were presented in, let me just get this plastic cellophane off, but I'll show you what I mean when I get the book open properly. Get that out of the way. Not going anywhere. So yeah, this is in landscape format, so it opens up like that. So you can see the full piece of artwork there, presented in monochrome, full colour on the front, whereas a book will basically open up like that. Basically, that's portrait format. So what this does mean, and as I've said before with the books in this line, this is a little bit difficult to really handle with any ease. It just feels like the pages are sort of like a little less controllable. Nevertheless, let's get into this. We we have an explanation of the last era. So this is essentially covering the last 8 books of the series, covering the latter period of the tales about Burgundian Princess of Mars. We've got a discussion of what the themes are in this book, what's in the book. So we've got tales of the era, peoples of the era, champions of the era, so on. Mysteries of Barsoom in the era, and then how to narrate it, and then science and not. And then of course we have details of also what's in this book. This also takes John Carter's adventure, take into the fact that John Carter's on Mars, take him off Mars during the period as well, because essentially, how many adventures could John Carter have on Mars? The author's looking around for more ideas, expanding the world, and so on. So we get into tales of the era, such as involving Thuvia, the Maid of Mars. Just down there. And then over the page we'll have the chess, dealing with the chessmen of Mars. And a lot of this is new to me, because essentially I've only read a few of the books themselves. And then we've got the details about the mastermind of Mars, exploring the threats to the world of Barsoom. We're talking we're looking at things like the fighting men of Mars, swords of Mars, the stories, synthetic men of Mars, and so on, skeleton men of Mars, and so on. And then we really come on to essentially continued adventures on dying Barsoom. As the adventures of John Carter and the Age of Thoris come to a close, these two prominent figures have been stranded on the distant world of Sassoon, Jupiter, and the skeleton Morgels are on the verge of launching an invasion of the Red Planet. Helium remains one of the greatest cities on Mars and sits as a centerpiece to a vast alliance of nations brought together by the favoured warlord. Still, there are numerous forces at work, both within the alliance and beyond, which could threaten the prosperity of the Red Planet. So essentially, with the two central characters in the stories on Roy, the possibilities of essentially the player characters being left up to defend against the dangers, whether they, that's the invasion by, the skeletal Morgels, for example, being an option. And then we go into an analysis of the era's stories, really breaking them down for the ideas of what's in there. So Thuvia of Maid of Mars, and Cador's exploring the concept of dampers of distress there. And that's going to do that for each of the different stories. So whether that's dealing with the nascent mental powers or fragile license, superstition and myth, that sort of thing, it's all in there. It's not going into any great depth, because essentially it's a fairly brief supplement, as it were. But it's still there. It's very nicely presented. And it's really in keeping with the books, which they're adventure books. There's slim adventure books. They're drawing on as much content as they can for the setting. And then we go people of the era and playing during the era. We're going to look at basically the Skeleton Men of Mars, the kind of final novel, before we go into that. So there aren't a lot of illustrations in this, which I think is a bit disappointing, but we do have newly discovered races, such as these weird creatures. And so there are illustrations here, but it doesn't seem quite as prolific. Those are the Caldanes, I believe, and then we've also got the Messenas. And these are done nice. I think what I like about these, they're done very brightly done, vibrantly done, essentially very sort of like pulp style. Not quite lurid, but and then we have the Ghoulians, who are the kangaroo men. I'm just going to go hold my head down here while I raise my eyebrow quite a lot. Okay, and Cat, who's not else, has just got down for a stretch, so I've got a bit more room to move around a bit. And we've got floors for all of them, so whether that's Caldane talents or accolades and so on. Essentially, talents essentially advantages, and accolades essentially are things that the player characters can sort of like achieve and sort of like purchase, as it were, along with floors as well. So it allows you to create interesting NPCs and player characters using these rules. And there are more in here also for the Earthborn and the Red Martians and so on, and the rules also here for mixed race heritage characters, and the effects of colour and heritage, because you've got Red Martians and Green Martians and so on. And then Champions of the Era looks at the notable characters like Halt and Gore, and these typically sort of like get a good page to themselves. As I say, you are desperately trying to keep this book steady, not always successfully, but there we go. So lots of NPCs in here as well. Basically covering all the NPCs essentially, and others that actually appeared in the stories, so the narrator can use them in her campaign. Nice bit of action artwork there. Unsuspecting guard or something like that about to be taken down by an attacker, whether that's an assassin or something else, I don't know. Okay, and then mysteries of bossing, because there are lots of mysteries, and oh yeah, there we've got a basic example of weird science. We're going to get onto that in a minute, because there's a whole section on weird science which the narrator can use in her campaign. So strange technology, we have things like objects of invisibility and new weaponry such as disintegration rays, which I'm presuming is what that was. Radium weapon developments, which is actually perfectly in keeping with the period, because when but Edgar was writing, radium would have been essentially the wonder substance of the age, as it were, because it was bright and was a surefire health cure, except of course it was radioactive. But you'd have it on your watch to denote particular the numbers around the side, and on the hands of the watch, and that sort of thing, and more. Unfortunately, thankfully no longer used as a health cure. And we have talents like mind reading and mind control, so on, and then very mysterious places like Domina and the Messina Dungeon, or the Messina Jungle, and the fields of Jetan, the workshops of Tonal. Again, they're due right up, and each of these locations has got a nice little plot seed as well. So there's ideas in here. And again, it's like Corfel's Cave. This gets a special box here because it's slightly different to the normal play. If you there's a bit of advice for the narrator. Okay. So the narrating the era. So what makes the Jeddak of Jeddak common themes and tone, like political infighting, and everyone wants to rule the world, strange threats and stranger allies, weird science, and how to actually narrate the era, like the growth of the royal family, new generations of heroes. So essentially the characters would have had previous adventures, found partners, potentially settled down and had families, and now their children are basically coming of age. So you can do a bit of a generational play there as well. Other ideas are sort of campaigns, so we have like the Struggle of Peace, War of Assassins, and Lost World and Ancient Ruins. And in some ways, throughout the Edgar Rice Burroughs, the John Carter of Mars role-playing game, it's always been about lost cities and ancient ruins and mysteries, and discovering as well as adventuring. Okay, so moving on, let's say So the menaces and mysteries of the world, like Boss, Rasum, the first planet, Korsum, the second planet, and even the possibility of going to Venus. So John Carter of Venus. And in many ways, essentially, even if you don't role-play this game, if you are looking for an analysis and breakdown of the source material, one of the great things about a good role-playing adaptation is you'll find it here. You know, you'll find it in a role-playing supplement or role-playing game, and I think this is doing a decent job of it just from the overview. As I say, first time I've, you know, as I keep saying, first time I've looked at this in any detail. Then we have further adventures, so more adventures here for the player characters, you know, and for the narrator to run for them in the period, essentially sort of, I suppose, in a way, bringing the John Carter of Mars campaign towards an end. So multiple adventures in here, then random adventure rules as well, essentially as we've seen before, a little bit different, but specifically tied to the period. So lots of tables the narrator can roll on there to create antagonists and degrees of dramatic escalation, resolution, and so on, and a cliffhanger. Before we get on to mad science and inventions like new metals and chemicals and communication detection, flyers and spaceships and so on, because essentially already the Barsoom has got airships, because hey, it's Mars, and if you don't have Mars with airships, it's not really Mars. At least not in gaming. You know, in sort of like planetary romance settings anyway. Then we have, let's have a look, things like Vampires of Mars and Other Untold Stories, performing limb and organ transplants, all this in sort of like, you know, the new horrors of science. I think that's a nice thing. You know, you're going to give all these the player characters are going to go out and explore and go discover amazing things, and then sort of like find out some of the horrors dark ends to which the science has been put to, in whether that's in ages past or by somebody right now. So there we go, like a section on the vampires of Mars, and then yeah, and then, you know, basically good stories to be told in that. And it's a very pulp tradition, you know. You have, you know, good scientists and bad scientists. And then invention rules, because sometimes the player characters do like to invent things themselves. And if you've got an NPC inventors, well, sometimes, you know, you don't want to play. You actually want to give the player character something that kind of works mechanically rather than as well as narratively. You know, if you, and so on. So yeah, you've got complete rules for that. You know, just add imagination, as they say. And then essentially, I've got some example inventions like, you know, improvised smoke bomb such as an in the moment invention, or modification improvements like a radium shotgun, and others, or an invisible dagger, and then we get renown and accolades. So you can have science talents. So straight off, if you've got this, one of the things you can do is you actually can, straight off the play, you can have a scientist character. You know, somebody in the mould of Tesla, you know, or Rutherford, or somebody like that, or Eddington, all, you know, great scientists, some potentially scientists of their age, making discoveries they never would on Earth, but here on Mars, they can. So yeah. New science talents, scientific stories, and accolades, and so on, all ready to bring to the game. And I think that really nicely opens that up. And essentially what that means is that this, rather than just restricting this to the Jeddaks of Jeddaks era, the later era of John Carter of Mars, you can bring that science element into earlier things through your player characters and NPCs and so on. So yeah, that's Jeddak of Jeddak's era sourcebook for the John Carter of Mars role-playing game. So, I hope you've enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, please do click the like button down below. And if you've got any comments or feedback, appreciate you posting those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, where you will see me out here with a box and a book from which I will unpack or game and talk about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea and occasionally a cat who is not ours, then please do hit that subscribe button. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another unboxing in the Nook. Bye for now.